Hello, this is Patrick W. Crawford, Moo-Ack Productions, and this is a demonstration of the Fancy Feet rig which I've been repeatedly requested to upload onto BlendSwap. So what you have here is the file as you will find it if you were to download it from BlendSwap. The description will be in the link below. It features a short demo animation of how you can use the rig and the different controls, and of course showing off the Fancy Feet rig. So the main point of this is, of course, the way that the Fancy Feet rig works. So if I just move the body of the character down a little bit, you'll see that if I move the IK pointer for the foot, this is basically a bone or piece of the armature which controls where the foot points and how it's positioned. If I move this back and forth along the y-axis, you notice the foot actually rocks as if the bottom of this IK bone were the actual ground instead of dipping below or kind of rolling unrealistically on top of it. So this is the rig that I spent a lot of time developing for GameChap's music video One More Fright. I should note that though it looks quite nice in this scenario, it is not a flawless rig. I would not actually recommend using this for a full animation. So if I just rotate it around the Z, you notice that at some point when you go 90 degrees off of the rest position, the legs start to sort of jump or jitter around. This is sort of a consequence of the way I set up the constraints. I spent a lot of time trying to fix it but did not come to an actual fix. So if you do use the rig, be aware of that. It's very limiting because it means you can't use the Fancy Feet control when you're going on anything other along the y-axis, really, so it's kind of a big problem. But regardless, I'm going to now go over a sort of description on how I approach the creation of this rig. If this is all you're interested in, then thanks for watching so far. But if you're going to keep watching, this is not going to be a tutorial. Again, I had difficulty kind of figuring it out myself. It's kind of not that easy to explain. And I'm going to be doing tutorials later on, as I've said in the previous videos, so if you're really looking for a tutorial on rigging, you can wait for that or do other searches. So as the main basis, I looked actually to a model of a more typical humanoid rig. This is also when I found a BlendSwap here. Again, I'll also link this in the description so you can find this. So again, this is just a more generic humanoid rig. If I look in onto the foot, you have a similar IK control for where the foot is positioned and how it's rotated. But then you have this extra roll control, which controls how the foot, well, rocks or rolls on the ground. So again, if you pretend this red bone that's now highlighted acts as the ground, if I rotate this bone here, the foot will actually rock along the ground. And you can see the way this is sort of accomplished is with these two bones right here. They have specific constraints on them which limit them between two sets of angles so that when the bone is moving past this point, it doesn't rotate any farther. And that's how the rocking is accomplished. That in itself, although it might look a little complicated at first, is not very difficult. But the problem is that is for a Minecraft rig that kind of breaks the effect of having just a QB or two-piece leg segment. So here you'll notice that the leg might be at this orientation and the foot's at this orientation, but here I want the leg and the foot to be at the same, not at some like more obscure angle or like that. So the way I had to combat with that is basically do a series of other more workaround constraints. So if I'm just going here and enable X-ray mode, and I will go into some of the other layers I have here that have the control pieces. So yes, there are quite a lot of bones. I think there's like 10 or so for each leg. The main primary bone are these two. These are what actually are controlled or parent to the mesh for the IK rig. So you see this bone here is what has the IK control. This bone points directly towards this bone, same as a typical rig, and this is a knee pointer as always. Then I have the two rotation bones, similar to how the other BlendSwap rig worked, But then instead of having this just control or deform the bottom of the mesh, what this actually does is control the position of a second bone. If you look closely here, where I have the 2 upper leg and 2 lower leg bones, they're at similar but not exactly the same position. Again, these bones here highlighted, those are the IK controlled bones, whereas these bones selected are the ones that actually deform the mesh. And so when this bone rotates here, I can't rotate now because it's constrained, but when that rotates, it's actually controlling the position of this one. Now, this is still a little bit of a problem because in order to define the rotation of this bone at this point, you would normally have to do a forward kinematic rig, not an IK rig. So normally speaking, it would not be possible to have the IK control it while also being able to control the orientation at that point, given it starts there. It might sound a little bit complicated, but basically what it means, it's a contradiction in the actual scaling of the bone. So the way that I try to combat this was on these 2 bones, I added extra constraints, which make them scale a little bit according to where the position of the bone is, or where the position of the IK rig is. So if you look on to, I can't remember which one it's on, this one, nope, this one just copies the rotation of this bone, so that's what allows for it to have the 2 rolling bones define its orientation. This bone has the stretch to constraint. So this bone will actually stretch from this point to the end of where this bone is. So as the walk cycle is going, if you look really closely, you will notice that the bone actually is scaling in and out a little bit. If you watch this point here, it gets shorter and then longer again. And while, again, that's not maybe the most accurate specifically wanted effect, that is what allows for the rig to work. So again, I mentioned that you don't want to use this for animations because though that's a really nice effect, there was another part of the rig that I just could not set up that was just based on local or world space transformations. So again, when I rotate it, there's a point where you're 90 degrees off the rest position that the legs kind of jitter or jump around. And anytime you cross this line, it will do that, and you'll see that in the animation. That has to do with one of the bones, I can't remember where, but it has, yeah, this bone. This was another reference bone kind of used in a weird way in the process, but you'll notice that as I move this bone kind of moves around, and though it doesn't look like it's related to anything that's going on with the rest of the rig, that is actually how this bone gets its rotation. And the problem is the desired effect or motion of this bone was accomplished only using local space with parent. And that's what makes it inconsistent when you're rotating it along the z-axis, because the armature bones don't have higher rotation values than 90 degrees, so there's a snapping point. And because it's not based on just the local mesh, or the local bone, or it's not based on the world coordinates, the snapping will continue. But that is, at least in a nutshell, the way the rig works. If you will insist on continuing to use this rig, I guess I'll just make a couple quick notes on the main features. The mouth rig works probably as you would expect. You can move, rotate, scale the mouth into whatever position you want. The eyelids are controlled by these here. You scale them, so if I were to press Alt-S, that closes the eyelid. If I scale it up, it kind of moves it back up. Same with the bottom ones, you move it like that. For the arms, see here, this bone is what has the IK rig, so I can use this to move the arm around. But if I want forward kinematics, of course, I can go into the constraints panel and change the influence. Now I have forward kinematic control over this rig, or this bone. Another feature, I guess, is the hands. This is the control for the hands. Again, there's a little snapping issue, so again, it's not perfect, but this makes it for easy, sort of quick positioning of the hand. The thumb is just done automatically. The way this works is if you can go into here and enable some of the extra layers, this one, you'll notice that I have extra bones here, which are parented to this bone. Basically, if I go into, I'm missing another layer here. There we go. Each finger has its own bone, and it has a track to constraint. If I turn off the rotation limit, you'll notice that it will exactly follow this bone here. And so that's how, when I'm scaling this around, it's kind of changing where and how those are oriented without actually having to individually place each finger. Again, there's another snapping issue with that if you go past here, just based on the way that rotations are calculated for these armatures, but that can at least more or less be avoided. So in general, that is my Minecraft rig. I'm sorry I was not able to find a proper fix for the foot, but yeah, hopefully at least the idea behind it is interesting. So as always, thank you for watching.
Moo-Ack.